Good morning. I'm Coryat from Local Market Launch, President, CEO, founder. What we do at Local Market Launch is we make businesses findable on all platforms and devices. And why that's important is the same reason why we are all here, really, and that's really the smartphone that we all carry in our pockets. 94% of smartphone users search for businesses on mobile. 85% of those mobile searches result in an action within 5 hours. And 60% of smartphone users buy something online every month. So local is really becoming all about mobile. Local, as you guys all know, local, mobile, social, they're all kind of converging. And of course, as marketers, marketing communication is really what it's all about. And traditionally, in the early days of the internet, we had the cookie, and the cookie allowed us to monitor users on the internet and decide what type of sites they go to, sometimes buyer behavior, what type of demographics and psychographics, and we were able to send the right message at the right time to the right user, relevant data, relevant communication, and that's really what drives results in marketing. What I'm excited about with mobile and mobile location data is that it's going to allow us to, again, deliver relevant marketing messages at the right time to the right user. So in other words, somebody sitting in an airport is going to have a whole different level of relevance than somebody sitting in a restaurant or somebody at a trade show or somebody in a golf course. So that's very exciting to me. So I think we're all very excited about mobile. The panelists that we have today are experts in mapping data and analytics. How mobile analytics and mapping are transforming local, and they absolutely will transform local, and they will transform everything that we do. So Local Market Launch puts companies on the map. These are the people that build the map and supply the data for the maps. So I'd like to introduce the panelists of Steve Jacobs, the moderator, Bronwyn Agrios, Biz Dev and Strategy of Esri, David Shim, CEO of Placed, and Andy Ellwood, Senior Biz Dev of Waze. Thank you very much.
Hey, everyone. Very excited about this panel. We're talking about data, which, as we all know, is the basis of everything. So, I think, we'll just run a quick little introduction for you guys. Bronwyn, if you could, give the 5-minute pitch for what you do, that'd be great.
I'll give you 30 seconds. Bronwyn Agrios. I do biz dev at Esri. Esri is a mapping platform. We essentially do, nose to tail of everything mapping. We are a platform, which means that we enable you to make sense of your location data. We allow you to create location data, maybe where there wasn't any before, through APIs, through analytics, through data enrichments, and mapping infrastructure.
David Shim, Placed. I'm the founder, and we're a rating service for the physical world. So we have 70,000 panelists that we pay to install an app that allows us to measure about 1,000 locations per user per day. So think of us like Nielsen ComScore, but instead of TV or web, we provide ratings for the physical world.
My name is Andy Ellwood. I'm Senior Director of Business Development at Waze. Waze is a community of 49 million people that hate traffic.
Great. Succinct. So I'm going to kind of give you a quick idea of what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to touch on kind of the changing face of location data thanks to mobile, kind of what changed. And then we're going to look at what that means for marketers, particularly as we move from an explicit check-in era to a more implicit passive generation as technologies improve, as folks like Waze use passive location collection to solve problems like traffic and others, maybe with local discovery. Then we're going to talk about some non-marketing ways of using location data. We're going to talk to Bronwyn about the ways in which Esri is using location data to help brands not only engage with the consumers but improve the in-store experience with consumers. And then, of course, we'll touch a bit on privacy, which is a contentious, to say the least, subject, and an incredibly important one as far as what we can do in the industry to move things forward. And then we're going to finally touch on some bits about ROI and measuring return on investment. So Andy, Andy's in a great place because before Waze, he was working at Gowalla and has seen this transition from explicit to implicit. And so Andy, I'd love to hear how location data has changed over the past 2 years from your time at Gowalla.
Sure. So when Gowalla and Foursquare launched on the exact same day at South by Southwest 2009, the idea that location was an industry was prevalent, right? Because GPS had just really started to become ubiquitous across all smartphones. What you could do with that information, there was still a lot of the questions of like, I don't know if you guys remember robme.com. It would basically tweet out anybody who tweeted their location, said I'm not home, basically. Like people were really, really cautious about sharing that information. But as services got better and as more and more value was provided to those who chose to engage, the likelihood that somebody would be willing to, or maybe their sensors were a little bit, they became a little bit more comfortable with the fact that everything is location. And now location is not an industry so much as it is a part of everything that we do. Anything that's mobile, location is a piece of it. And with our time at Gowalla, everything that we were doing was responding to somebody explicitly saying, I'm here right now. And so the opportunity to market to them, to share information to them, or provide value to them was based on them choosing to say, now's the time when I want to be engaged. And so that was interesting, but it was, if I just checked in here at the conference, I'm not going to walk across the street, I'm not going to go 3 blocks to get something because I'm here. So it was a little bit of a challenge to actually convert somebody to go somewhere else. With Waze, what's interesting is because people are using us for their daily commute, we're averaging almost 7.5 hours a month of usage for daily commutes, more so than I don't know where I'm going. We're actually influencing the in-between. We know where they are and we know what their destination is, and that gives us an opportunity to potentially raise some value in between.
Great. Bronwyn, Esri is a company that's been working with location data for a very, very long time.
Right.
And so, one thing I'm interested in is kind of your view on, with mobile location data, it's a lot of user-generated content and data information. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that and that shift.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you posed the question to Andy, you said, how has it changed over time? And you said 2 years, which, I mean, when we look at the span of time in which people have been using location data in a digital form, it really changes that response. And I'd say probably one of the biggest challenges I deal with, one of the biggest educational opportunities I encounter in working with some of the businesses that have been working with location data for a long time, where addresses are location data, right? Or working with retailers who are just starting to get into social data or crowdsourced data. It's this idea of trust, right? Trust is the biggest. Can I trust crowdsourced data? And can I trust inferred location? Can I trust location coming from a GPS because this is margin of error? And I think my response to that usually is, in cases like Waze, it's crowdsourced data, but it's just a ton of crowdsourced data. So we've moved from this kind of lower volume, higher accuracy world of location data to higher volume, potentially lower accuracy or larger margin of error. And so that is definitely a shift in thinking for a lot of our, I think more of the traditional markets and retailers included. And I always encourage people to think about both, right? Don't make decisions off one source of data. That would be silly in any case. So, if you're going to use crowdsourced data for making decisions, combine that with your intelligent business data that you maybe have collected from another data source.
So, I'm curious, with that shift from kind of, a smaller amount of very highly accurate, highly dense information to a lot of noise. How does that shift kind of play into the opportunities for marketers, particularly kind of in the later end of that as we're moving from even explicit data to implicit, passive collection? David, when you're, talking to marketers, is there a translation that needs to happen? Is there a kind of a change in the opportunity?
They don't know how to use it today. So I give them, they see really cool data out there. They're like, oh, there's check-ins here, there's inferred data here, there's Hispanics hang out here. They don't know what to do next with it. So the traditional for mobile advertising right now is to say, I'm going to buy geofence inventory here, here, and here, and this is my competition. And that's where it kind of stops today. So when we're talking with agencies right now, they're very actively involved in terms of what else can I do? What can actually make me look different from anybody else out there? Because everyone is selling geofencing, and you're going to run out of space for geofencing. So they need to figure out something else to kind of pitch. And so they see the data, but then they see the data and say, okay, this is great. You're showing me that people who go to JCPenney are 66% more likely to then go to Macy's in the next 30 days. Now, how do I take action on this? So you need kind of that full kind of funnel or ecosystem to go in and say, now I've got the insights. How do I buy against it?
Sure. Sure.
Can I make a comment on geofencing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree that everybody is trying to sell geofencing, and geofencing as like this standalone, I don't know if you guys see this, I mean, is geofencing as this standalone type of entity is really, I don't want to say powerless, but it doesn't hold a ton of value, right? Geofencing is, well, okay, let's think back to the internet years ago when who in their right mind would stand up a website today without web analytics? Nobody, right? Nobody would do that. So geofencing is essentially web analytics for the physical world. I mean, Placed has that mentality. And so if we're going to use geofencing, let's do something with that data. It's essentially a data collection mechanism.
So yeah, I mean, you know, as far as geofencing, I mean, we've seen a lot of people use geofences in different ways and have that basic geofencing technology as the core to a lot of this other stuff you're built upon. Is that the model, or is there something other than geofencing that you're kind of looking to down the road?
Is that directed to me?
I
think, you know, for us, I mean, the interaction with Waze is typically and always when you're driving, right?
Right.
If that's the reason somebody opens the app is because they're going from point A to point B, and we're going to show them the most optimistic way there possible. You know, our maps rewrite themselves in real time based on other drivers, based on information that's been sent in and then triple checked and verified by, you know, just the fact that there's other drivers on the road at that segment saying that there is an accident, there is traffic, things along those lines. And so what's interesting is that because we own our maps, and you know, we're one of 4 people in the world that actually own the map, you know, from the core, the ability for us to build the maps in such a way that they can be updated and edited in that real-time moment gives us a lot of flexibility that isn't available, you know, in other circumstances. And because it's 100% community-driven, you know, that we have 100,000 map editors around the world that are constantly keeping our maps up to date. Even just driving in this morning, you know, there's construction just 2 blocks over, and that made me a little bit late to get here. But in order for that to not happen for other people today, I shut down that road segment from my phone while I was at the stoplight saying, you can't drive here today. They're doing construction. And so other people will not be routed down that direction. And so it kind of, you know, that type of real-time, I'm there, now it's up to date, makes a pretty interesting use case for us.
So your Waze is one of 4 companies that actually owns its own map, and it did that in 5 years?
We started, yeah, it was an interesting project in 2005, 2006, when our founder was using his Palm device and hacked his traditional navigation unit that was in his car because he didn't like the routes that it was sending him on, and used the data that he could pull in from his Palm, and then we've crowdsourced all the maps around the world. Israel, Indonesia, and Costa Rica actually use Waze maps as the official maps of the country because they're more accurate.
So who gets disintermediated in this?
From a mapping perspective?
From either a mapping or a location data perspective as a whole.
Well, one thing that I think, you know, a very public mapping news story last year was Apple Maps. And you know, afterwards, Tim Cook came out and said, "Hey, sorry about that. In the meantime, use Waze," which was obviously a good day for us. and what that showed was what we're building is not just a traffic app, right? But we've actually, because we own the maps, it gives us the ability to layer on a lot of things on top of that as we go. And it also shows how hard it is to build and maintain a map.
Yeah.
And you know, Google spends upwards of $1 billion a year maintaining their maps. We have 100,000 map editors that are a part of our community that do it with us. And so at Waze, we think about ourselves as empowering a community to help each other, help outsmart traffic. and the map is the platform on which we get to do that.
I think it's going to be interesting over the next, I was going to say several years, it's probably not even that long, to see, I mean, there's Google owns its map. Esri uses a collection, a wide variety of data to build our map. Some commercial, we work with OpenStreetMap and other open source content providers and local data providers. But it's going to be really interesting over the next 18 months to 2 years to see how that starts to trickle out, because building a map is really, really hard and it's really expensive. It's Apple. It basically did everybody in the mapping space a huge solid.
Yeah.
I mean, they proved it. It's hard.
They very publicly showcased how challenging it is, because there's so many different interactions that happen just around trying to get from point A to point B.
Right.
That it's not just we've got a map.
And it's not just the map; it's also local search, right? Who uses the Apple local search?
I mean, are there parts of Esri's been around for a while? Are there parts of Esri's business that are more subject to being disintermediated than others?
Possibly, but my immediate reaction to that is that Esri is a company that's been around for 50 years, and there's been a lot of technology change over that time, and so we're a very adaptable company. And so doing things like, not relying on a single source of content to build our maps or our search is one of those ways that we kind of remain nimble.
So kind of switching gears for a second, one of the things, obviously, I had a great conversation with Amber Case, who her company was acquired, and is very anti-geofencing, particularly for marketing, but there's a lot of use cases for location data, outside of marketing.
Yeah.
And, particularly, David, you guys have developed this great way to get consumers in to share their location, and are finding all this different ways to use location to improve a business. I'm curious kind of how you see that divide between kind of marketing and other services, and kind of what's interesting you today.
Yeah, I think with the marketing, it's clear cut. If I can identify where there's an opportunity to shift people's behaviors, I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'll use geofencing, I'll buy media against that, et cetera. What we're finding is another market for us has been market research and consumer insights. So P&G, GM, et cetera, all these companies have huge consumer insights teams. And what they typically do is, to understand what people do in the physical world, they'll actually go out and do a survey. They'll hire a team to go out in the market, and they'll start to collect this data and normalize it. And it takes, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars to pull that together. And then on top of that, it takes months, potentially weeks to months, to get that done. And what we've done is we've actually have a click kind of panel where you can go in and say, let me use a real example. We had a high-end retailer that came in and said, hey, we're not doing really well with millennials. We need to figure out why they're coming into our store, but where else are they going? Because we know they're coming in, but they're not buying. So we went in our interface and we said, show us all the millennials, which is 14 to 24 females that went to this high-end retailer, and show me what other businesses they go to. And what we found at the top of the list was Ross, Burlington Coat Factory, Payless Shoes, and then it was Hot Topic, Aeropostale, and American Eagle Outfitters. So from their perspective, all of a sudden, they anecdotally had a suspicion that this was occurring, but now we can actually quantify that. And they're like, okay, now I can actually take action on this data versus saying anecdotally, I think this is what's happening, so I'm going to spend money against it. Now we can actually show that.
I think one of the interesting things that we spoke about was the use of not only data, but location services to be able to improve the in-store experience as well.
Yeah.
How many of the brands or retailers are interested in that, and is that going to be a sizable part of the market for location services?
The in-store experience?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of those emerging markets where, I would love to be able to stand in front of, when I'm at Target and be standing there for 10 seconds and then have the retailer push me a notification to say, nudge me towards buying a specific brand versus generic versus name brand or something. I think that's definitely something we'll see coming. The indoor location is, the ability to do indoor location is still it's in its infancy. How you use Wi-Fi. There's a retailer that we're working with that they have Wi-Fi within all their stores, but you have to opt in, and it's not just opt in, but you have to opt in every time you walk into the store. So it kind of inhibits that ability to actually connect and communicate with your customers while they're in store. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where it goes. I don't know if you guys are doing much with indoor Waze driving. You're not going to be segues.
It would be interesting to crowdsource. Aisle 9 is full
Hopefully
right
not
now.
driving.
Go to halftime.
So, I mean, that problem with figuring out the ways to get the opt-in is a basic problem with privacy. And as we're dealing with very, very intrusive stuff, me sharing my location when I'm sitting here, when I go over there, when I go back to my hotel, without realizing it, there's a very sensitive element to that. Al Franken, Senator of Minnesota, there's this problem with Euclid Analytics, which does a lot of passive kind of opt-out. And he said, it's one thing to track someone's shopping habits through a loyalty card or credit card purchase. Folks understand that their information may be collected, but people have a fundamental right to privacy, and I think neglecting to ask consumers for their permission to track them violates that right. I guess, my question is, in part, first, is that feeling of, it's okay to do it loyalty card, but it's not okay to do it with this, just kind of a matter of time for people to become accustomed to it? Or is there, something more fundamental to Senator Franken's issue?
I mean, I think, as I said, just with what we saw with, the 2.5 years of Gowalla before it was acquired by Facebook, and then, what we're even seeing now with Waze is the more value you provide, the more somebody understands why you need that information. If it's just, I'm tracking you, that, I'm not okay with that. No, thank you, right? But if there's a specific use case for this is why it's valuable to you, for us to be able to provide more value based on your current location, which, in Waze is obvious because, you're driving and we're giving you the directions. But I do think privacy is essential and it's huge, especially with the mobile device. I mean, the fact that we were asked to leave our phones backstage before we walked out here was a big deal for me. It's leave your left hand back there. And I'm okay with always having the phone on me, but the idea that it's tracking me or it's giving information to people that I don't know that I've opted in for that permission is something that we think a lot about. But where it goes, I think there is some just education that's going to happen. Some sensory flare-ups they'll die down a little bit, but I still think that it's fundamental that people understand why they're sharing the information and what value they're getting out of it in return.
And I think the value exchange is key. So with Waze, they see everywhere you go, but they're getting value, so the consumer understands there's a trade-off. For us, we actually give them cash to share their location data. So when you have that clear-cut value exchange, it works. When you run into the indoor Wi-Fi scenarios where you've got MAC address and they don't know what's going on and there's no real value exchange there, that's where I think you get kind of the Frankens coming up where they're what's going on? This isn't a clear opt-in.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to actually pose a question back to Andy. Yeah. I think something that comes up a lot when we start talking about data analytics against location data collected from mobile is that when you inform somebody that they are opting in and you're providing them a value, they know they're one of one, but they're opting in as one of one, but they're not necessarily realizing they're opting in as one of many, and that something like Waze, or if a retailer is using, geofencing or location tracking, they're actually going to do a lot with that data, and we want them to do a lot with that data. That's, I think the value of analytics. But when you opt in as one, thinking you're one person, I think the result is much different than knowing that we're going to take this data and start creating a lot of inferences around it from the group. Do you guys communicate? How do you educate your community about that?
Yeah, our onboarding process is pretty thorough just because it is all you are right now in real time. Right. Here we go. And so, and because of just the very nature of saying crowdsource maps, it's gone from crowdsource at this point. I think it's mass participation is probably a fair way to say it. That you're helping others, right? Ways outsmart traffic together. And so that's part of it because about 95% of the what we are able to present on the map is coming just from passive. Just by having the app open in your car, you're improving the maps of everyone around you. If about 5% of what the feed that's coming in is people actively participating or doing like what I did, shutting down a road, reporting a cop, reporting an accident, whatever that might be. That's just about 5% of where that data comes. And so because you know that you're a part of a community that's helping, you know that there's people further ahead of you in traffic that gave you the heads up to traffic, and now you're letting people that are probably behind you know. There's that community aspect, which is why I think we have the engagement that we do.
I think.
Yeah, no,
I'm totally taking over your moderator role.
It's all right.
I just think that that's going to be a growing challenge for, I mean, Esri provides a platform, right? So we provide a platform with tools that allow people to build applications. And we try and educate our developers to say, hey, if you're using geofencing, you're essentially tracking somebody's location, do it responsibly.
Yeah, I think there's an issue. We talk a lot about location going from an industry to a layer,
Right.
and when I'm going with a Waze, for example, or any other kind of location app, I'm in a location application. I'm in the mindset of sharing my location.
Yep.
But as location is kind of applied and integrated in all these different applications, that's a less transparent value exchange.
Yeah. Well, the transparency. I mean, that's the big part, right? It's it's very clear, right? Like, just for fun, when I'm sitting in the doctor's office, I don't flip open Waze to see what's going on, right? There's no value to it. That's not valuable to me, right? I'll flip over Twitter or I'll play dots, right? Like those are the things. But so when there's the value exchange, like you said, you know why you opened it. It would serve no purpose if you couldn't have that piece of it. But like you said, when it starts to cut into that layer below, and it's like we're just tracking you in the background, that's when it starts to get strange. And I keep hearing solo-mo fanboys say that everybody wants that, and everybody doesn't want that. It's something that I think there's a way to think about it, but it's a long ways off from really being something that I think is ubiquitous across everything.
Yeah.
David, I mean, you guys have found a way to access consumers' location and provide it to a lot of different brands. I'm curious whether you've had any flare-ups around privacy, whether you guys you have a very distinct onboarding process, but whether you kind of reiterate the value that you're providing to these consumers who are doing this throughout the process.
Yeah, so with our opt-in process, it's a triple opt-in. So you install the app, you have to give it permissions, or it asks for permissions depending on your operating system. Then on top of that, we have a dialog box that opens up right when you open up the app that says, this app is measuring your location, and you say yes, and then you get the terms of service. And our app has a little under 500,000 downloads to date, and its average rating is 4 stars. So the biggest complaint people get is, oh, you're not paying me enough. I'm not winning enough. So it's not like you're taking my location, and you see people go in there and say, oh, this is a fair trade-off. You're just going to measure where I'm at, and you're not going to serve ads because we're only doing analytics. So by being upfront, I think people appreciate that, and then they can make that decision. Is it worth $5, $2 a month to share my location data? Yeah, most people will say, it's not that bad. And then there's a group that says, no, I don't want to do it for $2 or $5. And what we've done is we've actually built a second app called Give to Charity. So now, instead of actually taking the points and getting Amazon gift cards, you can actually pick one of 7 charities. And as long as you keep the app installed, we're continually making donations to the charity of your choice. So it's really finding what that sweet spot is where people are willing to trade that data.
Sure. So, in talking about location is something that's a big part of all these companies. You look at the major companies. Look at Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Each have their own mapping platform or location platform, and obviously some rumors around Waze and Facebook. I'm curious, Andy, from your point of view, what the value is for one of these major technology companies that covers everything. To have location data and mapping is kind of one element of that.
Yeah, I think it's maybe the easiest way to frame that is to think about what search did for the internet. Maps are going to do for mobile, right? It gives you context, the ability for it to expand your understanding of what it is that you're engaging with, and so that's the piece that we continue to see is that as more and more things get layered on and more, it's not just about where is it on the map, but how do I get there? One of the huge things that we're seeing from both our small and medium-sized businesses as well as our national retailers is that when we do present somebody with an offer or present somebody with a piece of information that we think might be of interest to them between where they are and where they're going, the secondary action, the call to action is click to navigate. So it's not just presentation of an ad, but it's the ability to show the conversion of that ad into a car in your parking lot. And so that's something that we're seeing because we just we present everything in context. And that's the other piece that I think is really important, is that if we are presenting you with Dunkin' Donuts, free cup of coffee, it's 3 miles away, it's going to be a 2-minute detour, yes or no, right? So you're like, oh yeah, I'll drive 2 minutes to get my cup of coffee. And so we're actually working on proximity incentive graphs where we can actually work with any and all retail locations and say, to get somebody to drive 5 miles to your location, you're going to have to do more than a free cup of coffee. What is that? How does that look? And so we can basically say, if it's just off the frontage road, they'll do it for a discount. If it's this far into, this many turns or this far out of the way, it makes it a little bit more interesting.
So yeah, talking about the, that massive opportunity, David, when we were having our conversation, you said that, once we have ROI, this market will be big as paid search.
Yeah.
Explain that, justify that.
So when you think about mobile and moving up one level above maps, I would say it's location that makes mobile distinct. And it's the ability to actually change someone's behavior in real time in the physical world. So with QSRs, you don't buy the keyword McDonald's. I mean, you might, but you're not going to get people that click on that keyword when they're at home, see the website and decide, hey, I'm going to drive 20 minutes to go get McDonald's. But if you have a mobile device and you see something that says, oh, okay, it's within a few miles and they've got this new product, and sure, why not? I'm going to go eat that. And then if you can quantify that, so you can actually measure, did someone who saw that ad actually go into the McDonald's? That's the holy grail. That's where all of a sudden QSRs are going to line up. Retailers are going to line up and say, this makes sense. For every dollar that I spend in mobile, I'm making $5 back. Right now, it's still kind of fuzzy in terms of the way that people calculate that ROI. But once that's there, I think that's going to drive huge amounts of dollars.
Is that a technology problem or a kind of business coordination problem?
I think it's a combination because you've got the cookie issue, so there's no unified cookie across the board. But then on top of that, there's not a clear way to measure if someone saw an ad, how do I actually know they went into a store? Because when you open up an app, you get a location-based ad, you have to keep that app open the entire time and then walk into the store to even get that chance of a connection. So it's going to get there, but it's not there right now.
Yeah, we actually, because obviously we're appealing to people when they're driving, we only present things when you're going 0 miles an hour, so stop at a stop sign, stop light, things along those lines. But we know that you're probably about to start moving again, so we click save for later, and so we actually have my offers inbox on the Waze app, so that if you do see that offer, you can then go and actually show and redeem it. Because like you said, a lot of times you're taking a screenshot, you're awkwardly holding your phone so that you don't click that ad closed, and so that's another piece. Is kind of, as you said, showing that conversion all the way through.
Great. So, just kind of wrapping up here. I'm curious, kind of what you guys are most excited about. Looking at the huge adoption of mobile devices. It's really reaching a point of ubiquity. Kind of in a moonshot sense. What are you most excited around the use of location and some of the technology there?
There's a lot of things I'm excited about, but one of the things I'm excited to see this conversation move beyond mobile couponing. And we haven't talked about mobile couponing here, which has been awesome. And obviously there is technical challenges. I think there's probably business challenges that make mobile couponing maybe successful or unsuccessful today. But I would love to see the mobile developer community and the marketing community start looking at what's actually possible. Let's think beyond this low-hanging fruit of sending somebody an offer and look at, customer service. What can we start doing with the data that we're collecting to better inform the rest of my organization, like all the way down the line? And maybe that the incentive is the coupon, but I'd love to see us think more creatively about what's possible with location data from mobile.
Sure.
I'd say quantifying the physical world. Just generally, I think if you look at Fitbits, fuel bands, all these things, those are really early stages. Just to look at, hey, this is how many steps I took, this is how much I ran, is just the beginning. And I think there's the ability to go way beyond that to what it looks like for the web. In terms of everything is measurable, I think the same thing's going to happen with the physical world. And you're going to see really interesting use cases that have never come up before.
And I think that, for us, obviously, we think about ourselves first as a community and then the services later on top of that. But thinking about the power of the community and what can be done, I live in New York City, and so during Hurricane Sandy last year, it was displaced for 6 days. And, Waze, actually, we worked with the White House and FEMA in the entire Northeast to identify gas stations that were still open. We basically just asked our community to let us know, is this gas station still open, yes or no? If so, prices, things along those lines. And that's how FEMA actually decided where they were sending the trucks with gas. And so being able to harness the power of the community in that way, that's just a glimpse into what we think is possible when we have the 49, 50 million people that we have worldwide with their mobile phones able to communicate and share information with us. I think we'll see a lot of amazing things happen.
Great. Thanks, guys. Well, we have a few minutes left. Just wanted to open it up to questions for the audience if there are any.
Hey guys, Howie Schwartz, Human Demand. So one of the things that I haven't heard covered is taking this data and using it for advertising off of either an owned and operated property, like Waze, you have data, you own the inventory, but actually taking this and making this available as a service for ad targeting for non-owned and operated properties.
So we had a use case about a month ago. One of our clients was using our data, and it wasn't necessarily the intended purpose, but they looked at people who went to their store, and then what other stores did they go to with a higher affinity than average for the U.S. population. And then geofencing is not the greatest thing in the world, but there's benefits there. And so they geofenced those businesses. And what they actually found was they were reaching a new audience where the click-through rate was on par with geofencing, just if you geofence within a mile, 5 miles of your store. But then on top of that, the secondary action where they either click to call, download a coupon, whatever that is, was 30% higher. So this was without telling us. They just kind of implemented this, and we're like, oh, this is actually really good. That they've been able to take this data that we didn't necessarily have this use case from day one, and utilize it to expand out their inventory availability.
So one more question we can maybe sneak in.
Yeah, my name's Tom Higley. My question is this. I'm a local merchant. I saw the ad. I clicked it. My customer saw the ad and clicked it. The question is, how do I know that it was the ad that brought them in and not something else? And what are you going to do to sort of help differentiate the response that occurs as a result of one thing versus another?
I think it's something that we're thinking a lot about. We've got our self-service platform, biz.waze.com. Allows you to go in and actually set up dashboards that show, from people that saw the pins or the pop-ups, how many people took a secondary action, and then from there, the actual way in which it, and we talked about this a little bit, is what is the conversion in store that shows that it came from there, and that's one of the things that I think we know that we're going to see a lot of advancement in, but I think we'll stay tuned is probably the best answer, because it's just in beta for us at this point.
I think we're, obviously, there's no exact way right now, which we kind of discussed, but there are ways of inferring, right? Like when you look at where the ad was served and where the closest place to redeem that ad is, for example, you can start to create like how much friction is there between that closest place and where the ad was served. And this is kind of what Andy was even saying about 5 miles versus 2 miles. What is too much friction? And so although you don't know that the ad is being redeemed, you can start to infer what will lead to a successful conversion. And if I have to get on the bus to get there, especially in San Francisco, I'm probably not doing it.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Let's give them a round of applause. And